everyone, welcome back to the All Inclusive podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Dr Thelá Thatch, a celebrated Chief Diversity Officer, now author and executive HR and equity strategist. She was recently recognised in the top 50 Chief Diversity Officers Power List 2023 and as a Woman of Achievement that same year. Dr Thatch brings a wealth of experience to our discussion. We discuss the essential insights every DEI leader should arm themselves with before embarking on this challenging yet vital journey. Dr. Thatch shares her extensive experience and the critical lessons from her journey highlighted in her new book, The Diversity Dilemma. This is an episode that is a must listen for anyone looking to navigate the complexities of DEI effectively. As always, before jumping into the video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on your notification bell, and follow on your favourite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. That being said, let's jump in. Hi, Dr. Thelá.
Hi. So nice to finally sit with you.
Yes. Welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited about this conversation. I can't wait.
I am thrilled.
Good. That's good. So let's jump straight in. You've made significant strides in the DEI field. What motivated you to pursue a career in DEI?
So it's a really interesting story. I actually wanted to be a reporter when I was studying for my undergrad. My bachelor's is in communications, and my ultimate goal was to be the next Oprah Winfrey. She was definitely someone I was looking up to. And so, fast forward throughout my career, I ended up doing these administrative things where I was working in entertainment, but I was also helping with recruitment. I was helping bring in interns and production assistants. So fast forward to this amazing job that I had as a regional HR manager. One of the things that was happening were people were coming to me and they were asking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they were asking me, why isn't this place diverse? And I did not have an answer. I did not understand the question. And it started my journey as I was already an HR person. It started my journey on this DEI discovery. And it was a big challenge to me. It was actually during my performance review when I decided that I wanted to take on this diversity challenge. And I never forget, at the time, my current person that I was reporting to, she warned me and she said, you don't want to do this because most likely they're going to put you on a list and you're going to get fired. And I just thought she was having a bad day. I
Oh,
didn't understand.
wow. Yeah.
And I thought, honestly, I thought she was joking. And literally that began my career in DEI.
Oh, wow. And so what keeps you driven in this challenging yet vital field?
So that very first moment when she told me that it was a possibility that I would be fired, that was enough of a challenge for me. I am the type of person, if you tell me no, I appreciate a challenge, first of all. Second of all, the person who was my boss at the time, who is still my friend, was a white woman. And I just felt like she didn't understand how I was reaching out to learn more about diversity, equity, and inclusion because I needed that support in the workplace. And so I figured that if I needed that support, there were hundreds, because at the time that organization had over 10,000 employees and 5% of the population was Black. And I could give all the stats, but the point is there were hundreds of employees that needed that support and had the same questions. And at the time I was starting to get new employees coming in, and the first question they would ask is, where are the employee resource groups? And no one knew what an employee resource group was. So I wanted to meet that need for the employee and for myself.
Oh, fantastic. And I know throughout your DEI journey, you have faced a number of challenges which you've overcome, as well as successes. And your newly published book, The Diversity Dilemma, which is amazing, it's making ways for its candid exploration of DEI. And I know within that, you do talk about a number of the different challenges in DEI and also explain a bit more about your personal experiences within the book as well. What inspired you to actually write it?
Wow, that is a loaded question, and it's simple and complicated at the same time. So, as I mentioned, when I started my role in DEI, there were so many responses that shocked me. And basically, I just wasn't equipped. And actually, what I'm writing about in the book is my experience around the trauma that I faced as I was doing something that I thought was good. So my book is actually called The Diversity Dilemma, a survival's guide for diversity good doers.
I love
Because
it.
I was a good doer, and do-gooder is kind of a negative term, so I had to say good doer. So I was a good doer. I just thought this makes sense. I'm doing something good. And it wasn't until I took on the diversity, equity, inclusion challenge and started leading that in my organization that I started experiencing negative comments, negative feedback. And basically, I started seeing behind the veil and I started getting comments and also actions that showed that they really did not want to promote people of color, things like stay in your lane, you're too big for your britches, you're asking the wrong questions. I could go on, but these were the personal and professional attacks that I dealt with every day. And so there weren't a lot of books at the time. This was almost 10, 11 years ago. And there weren't a lot of conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's so interesting because I reached out to those leaders, and I have to give a shout out to Renee Myers. She was most recently the head of diversity at Netflix. And she's the one who's coined the phrase diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. And she, of course, as you know, she's famous in the diversity space, but I never
Yeah.
forget I didn't know who to reach out to, and she came to, like, my rescue, literally. I didn't know her, and she met with me, and I just wanted to give her a shout out because she was really the only person who gave me any support during that time, and, of course, she didn't have a lot of time to walk me through how to do the DEI work. And so I ended up going to taking courses. I started task force, but each move was met with resistance. Each move was met with, why are we doing this? Why does it make sense? And sometimes I didn't really have an answer. I didn't know how to answer. I was shocked that they were even asking these questions. So in my book, keep trying to hold it the right way. In my book, I talk about kind of those basics that I had to learn, some of the definitions, some of the responses that I received around gaslighting, micro and macro aggressions, just a lot of different concepts that I was made aware of when I was in the role that literally I'm still repairing my mental and my physical from some of that trauma.
I mean, I'm so sorry that you went through that, but I'm so glad that you were able to find somebody that you could connect with and that could give you that additional support that you were looking for, even if it was on some time constraints for them. I mean, I do agree. I hear from leaders time and time again that their access to resources can be limited sometimes when they just personally just need to speak to someone else that understands the work. Um, because of the level of resistance that this work does does encounter. Even when you know and it's clearly obvious that we are doing the right thing, like this is right for everyone, but it's it's working
Right.
out how to overcome that resistance when people are saying no, like
Right.
we don't want
And
to do this.
yeah, and that to me, to go back to the reason I wrote the book, that to me is the diversity dilemma. It's it happened to me, this phenomenon. I'm a doctor. I'm always interested in phenomena that happens. And I would just sit and write like, why is this happening? It just was almost unbelievable, and it felt like some naturally occurring phenomena. And the more I talked about diversity, the more resistance I would get. The more I talked about diversity and inclusion, the more I felt excluded. So I was promoted to one of the top levels of the organization, and I felt smaller and smaller. I felt lesser and lesser. I I had never been so insecure my entire life. I felt like I had no executive presence. I just basically felt like an idiot from day to day, and I was made to feel just incompetent. And what I learn now is this almost, invisible playbook. I don't know where the playbook is, but putting people like me who are excited and passionate, and anytime they would introduce me, they would say, "This is Thele. She's passionate." Like my passion wasn't enough, though. My passion was never enough. And actually, I had more than passion. I had a master's in business at the time. I had close to 20 years of HR experience. I led task force. I was I had a lot of other experience, but I was reduced to just someone who was excited about diversity. And so I would go into these rooms and there would be these constant attacks to my intelligence, and it was a dilemma, and it was almost like, so eventually, just to kind of wrap up this dilemma, eventually, I just resolved myself to the fact that that was the job. The
Mm.
job was for me to be a target. The job was for me to take all the blows, take all the comments, to take all the ignorant statements around, I mean, anything you can imagine, I heard people say. And it actually was magnified because I was in human resources. I also saw the bodies, saw the numbers, saw the lack of compensation, saw the decision makers say, no, they're not a good fit. They're too dark, they're too light, they're too short, they're too fat, they're too married. They said these things to my face. And
Mm.
so, and I'm like, trying to keep my composure, but realizing that there is a really insidious issue, and now it's all being given to me. And I will also say the dilemma too was, as a Black woman, and I write about it in the book, I was so shocked. And now I totally, I admit it in the book too. I was called so many different names by my Black community. Like I was called an Oreo, I was called a token.
That's one section that I found really interesting, a fantastic read actually, and quite relatable to many leaders. I think with is this black female overseer phenomenon, which is what you coin it in your book, and it's you describe it so well, like you use like a powerful metaphor basically for that precarious position that a lot of leaders or black leaders that are trying to create more inclusive workspaces occupy for those underrepresented groups, and they all of a sudden turn around. I mean, their passion to do the work is there, and they're in the right position. They're trying to do their best, but all of a sudden, those people that they're in place to help, they aren't actually helping, and they're more so just ticking a box for senior leadership.
Exactly. We wouldn't have enough time to talk about all of the different experiences around the Black female overseer syndrome. But actually, this came to me in a realization. I was at the beach with some other Black women who were practicing mental wellness, and we're like, we're just going to take a mental wellness day. And these women were talking about their bosses who happened to be Black females and how they were being put in these boxes. And I said, you know what? That has been a pattern for me also. Not only did I report to women who were put in roles, mostly chief human resources officer roles, to be Black, to be an overseer to me, to make sure I was giving out the right message around DEI, but I was being groomed to be a Black female overseer myself. And
Mm.
I understand why I was receiving resistance. And I would be called into meetings where I'm so freaking excited. I don't even know how to describe how excited I was. I'm like, I'm sitting with a C-suite person and we're going to talk about diversity. We're going to talk about inclusion. And we're on my strategy around the employee resource groups in China and London, look at what I'm doing. Ah, and their first question would be, what are we going to do about the Black employees? I'm like,
Mm.
what? They're doing awesome. What do you mean? Well, we really need to handle so and so because I'm hearing she's out here saying this and that. I said, well, she's saying things that are true. Well, you got to go handle it. Like that was it. Those were my meetings. They weren't about strategy. When a new person would come in, it wasn't about strategy. We need to be careful. My first meeting with my new Black female overseer was we need to be careful. We can't make it look like we're favoring other Black women. I'm like, well, hi. Nice to meet you.
It must have been so difficult. And throughout your experience, what should organizations be doing to better empower their DEI leaders to actually do the work in which they have employed them to do?
I think it's a really easy answer. One of the things that I do outside, I'm a human resources consultant, but I also teach. I teach on at the master's level and the doctoral level, and it's really simple. One of the things I teach about is organizational objectives and organizational goals and the key elements that leaders have. And the number one element that a leader has is they understand the organization's goals. So if you're bringing in a DEI person, that person should not be crafting the goals. That person should be aligning themselves with the organization's existing goals in the same way you would bring in a person into sales, marketing, any of those other divisions. A new VP of sales is going to understand the mission and the goal on their first day, right? What we see with DEI leaders like myself, I had to write my own job description. I had to write my own goals. No one knew what I was doing. And then when I would try to get direction, they would make me feel like I was incompetent and that I should already know how to make up a goal for myself, make up a goal for this organization, and be able to, just define what DEI looks like for the organization. So, short version to me, I'm convinced that message comes from the CEO. That message comes from the C-suite. The CEO, and I always shout out, Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, right? At the time. He knows what he wants his organization to look like. He is in front telling people what diversity, equity, inclusion looks like, and he understands what it looks like. And then those people who report to him, now they have the charge to integrate DEI into all of the organization's goals. To me, it's really simple. But when and that's is what the book talks about, the diversity dilemma talks about, when you're tapped on the shoulder or selected to take on a DEI role without any definition, any direction around the diversity, equity initiatives within that organization, be extremely cautious. You may just want to just run the other way. I actually was offered a position as I was writing this book, right around the time I was writing this book. A dream. I just want to say, I will tell you, it's a place that makes happy. It was a dream position. It was making almost 3, 4 times I've ever, salary I've ever made. And as I was going through the interview, I just heard more of the same. Well, this is a new opportunity. This is a new division.
Mm.
You're
Because that's what
switching.
I was going to ask. Because I was like, so for our listeners out there, and many of them are DEI leaders themselves, and either have experienced what you have or actually currently are experiencing this when they're going into these C-suite meetings, and or they're looking for positions now, because we know a lot of leaders have been let go from their organizations, and they're looking for their next role, what next company. So what should they be looking out for? Like what would you recommend?
I would recommend you look for organizations that have an existing focus or an existing program around diversity, equity, and inclusion. They already have employee resource groups because guess what? Employee resource groups are 20, 30 years old. Like this is not a new thing. I would be very cautious if you are moving into or looking at an organization and they don't understand what an employee resource group is. So what happens with us as Black women, I'll just, I speak about Black women because I'm a Black woman. And what happens with us, especially, we want to be trailblazers. It is you know, it's an honor to be a trailblazer. I've been a trailblazer and I was honored, but it also comes with a tremendous weight. And so sometimes we take on these roles for the wrong reason because we're going to be the first and we're going to be the trailblazer. But that should actually be a telltale sign for caution because there's a reason there was not a first there because the first was not welcome. The first was not, if there was not a culture for the first to thrive. And so if you like, doing things the hard way and you have tough skin and you just in it, you like to fight and you like that you want to start a movement. And that's what I told myself I was doing. I would compare myself to Martin Luther King, like, oh, Martin Luther King. But Martin Luther King was assassinated. He paid a very big price for the work that he did.
That
So
is
if the
truth.
price you want to pay, and you will pay a price when you are fighting to get DEI into an organization. So I would say if you want a career in DEI, a stable, sustainable, healthy career, then you would go to an organization where they've been doing DEI in a sustainable, healthy way, where your CEO you can clearly go to their annual report or to their website, and you can clearly hear that they have been working for the past 10, because look, this isn't new. For at least 5 to 10 years, they've been doing the work. So I would say let go of this idea that we have to come in and break, break ground and be the trailblazer because it's a little late. I just think it's a little late. If you're going into a place that they've never done it, most likely it's because they didn't want to do it. And you're going to be going through those initial phases of feeling resistance. And
Mm.
that's my advice. And I think there's a lot of places that are doing the work. I work for some nonprofits, some of my clients who are doing amazing work. And then a lot of times you want to go into these roles, and I've been guilty of it too, for prestige. You want to pick the organization like a Facebook. Well, I'm the head of DEI for Facebook. So question, why are you doing this work? And what is your goal? So that's what I would say because it's not worth, and it sounds really dramatic when I say this, but it's not worth your soul. It's not worth your family. My family took a big hit when I was going through the traumatic experiences I was experiencing as a chief diversity officer for one organization. I didn't see my family because they had me traveling. I was the face. Hi, new DEI. Hi. And I didn't even remember what city I was in. And then while I was out there, I was also taking hits and taking abuses from executives in those other cities who were like, why are you here? We don't believe in DEI. So I didn't even have their support. So I'm traveling, I'm a traveling show, traveling, trying to convince people that DEI is important. And it just became more and more clear that it was just, a smokescreen.
I think length of time that has gone past now in doing this work or having this work spotlighted. I feel like the last 2-3 years there's been quite a lot of attention on it. It's always been there in the background. It just wasn't ever called DEI, but it's now kind of got a lot more traction. A lot more people are tuning in. And I agree with you. At this point that we are at now, I feel like any of those organizations that were just doing it because it was on trend, those are starting to fall away. And I do feel that there was a sense of, at the beginning, everyone was on board and wanting to make a change, and the people from underrepresented groups were enthusiastic when they were called up to serve, basically, and to be the only one or to be that trailblazer. And at that time, I feel like it was seen as an honor, and people were enthusiastic about doing it. And I agree with you that as time has gone on, actually, I feel like we now need to have the courage to actually say no and to really, really read between the lines and listen to the questions that are being asked of you, to the questions, actually, I would say the questions that aren't being asked, the things that they're not saying. As you've put it, kind of, because if they don't already have an ERG, I mean, by now it is a bit, it's a question mark. They don't need to have them all, and I agree. I think that um organizations, they're all on their own journeys, right? Where everyone's at different stages of their DEI journey, but I think if you don't even have one, or you don't even have plans to put one together at the time in which you're looking for a head of DEI, then it's probably too late, and your intentions aren't may not well be the best.
That just made me think of another practical solution for people who are looking to work in DEI. And so, yeah, oftentimes there are employees in the organization who have attempted to put together employee resource groups or task force. And I actually write about that in the book too, because what happens is usually people from underrepresented groups are being tapped on the shoulder to do additional work to create an employee resource group or a task force or a committee or whatever they want to call it. And they are trying. And so I do give credit to those organizations who say, we need to hire a person to take some of the workload off of our employees who are trying to do this. But I will also give a caveat to say, when you're interviewing for those type of roles, you want to speak to those people who have been trying to do it and get their experience. Why has this not been successful? What will I be walking into in this role? And so I speak to these type of people every day, and usually it's with tears because they are so frustrated. They thought that getting involved with the employee resource group, whether it's the, you know, Latinas for the company, Latinos for the company, like whatever group, black employees for the organization, they thought this was going to be a professional development moment. They thought this was going to be an opportunity for them to show their leadership, and that's actually how I would present it when I was in the role. However, what I started to see as an HR person, they started to become labeled as troublemakers. Isn't that Natasha who's in the Black Employee Resource Group? Yeah, that's the one. Why are you asking about Natasha? Oh, I'm just wondering if she has enough time to be promoted for this role if she's so busy with the group. If I had a dollar for every time a manager said that to me. And so these good doers, they think they're joining these groups, and some of them are not being supported by the organization. It's affecting their professional development, it's affecting succession plans, it's affecting their relationships with their managers. And so those are the questions when you're coming into a new role as head of DEI. It's a question around how are these groups and people supported? And how are you going to empower me to support them? Another big another big red flag, what's my budget?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't have to for you yet. Okay. We'll just let that sit there. So if you have been promoted to an amazing chief diversity officer, you have this big title and you have no budget, I will just end that conversation. I mean, what else is there to say? Ask
Yeah.
why you did it. That is the biggest companies, this is back to organizational development 101. You know what's important to a company by their budget, by what they budget
What they
for.
spend their money on. Yeah.
Where they spend, period. If they're not spending money, if you have, and I'm just going to throw it out there because it was true at one of the organizations, if your budget is $50,000 for the year for over 15,000 employees, but the sales budget is a $500,000, I can hardly say it without really laughing. It's not funny though. However, there's a problem. And a lot of us, especially Black women and people from underrepresented groups, we come in hopeful, I'll build my budget. I'll show them how amazing I am. And
Yeah.
then next year, they'll give me a $500,000.
It's a lot easier said than done, isn't it? Um,
Yes, it is.
But
And
in
using
in that though, in using that example, I know you've learned along your journey the importance of building allies and also alliances in order to
yeah.
be able to, for example, get a bigger budget. So can you share strategies for DEI leaders to be able to cultivate those allies and get those strong partnerships?
Great question. It varies depending on the culture that you're excuse me. And for me, I just want to share one point that I did not know again in my role. And it is so important to understand the CEO and his team, the people in the C-suite and his team, having that relationship with the C-suite. I would have never, I just want to say, I was very proud of being the underdog, right? Coming from humble beginnings and working my way up. And I would always reach across the table to people in lower management. What was happening in my experience, I didn't have that experience building allies with higher level management because I spent so much time in lower management, right? I had relationships with managers, with the individual contributors like, executive assistants, marketing coordinators. Those were my people because I was that person. But then when I moved into the vice president levels and higher director levels of the organization, I didn't spend the time with other directors, VPs, C-suite people to build allyship. And it really hurt my career at the time because they saw me as an outsider. And I was an outsider. I was still kind of with the people. Oh, I'm going to go hang out with the people. These my people. And I needed to really spend more time understanding and getting to know and investing in time with people, my peers, my new peers. But I share this because I did not know that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that I need, I, I can barely get it out, but I needed to invest in those relationships. So you also have to invest in those relationships with your allies. You have to teach your allies, but the only way you're going to teach them is through building trust and building relationships. So I had certain people, most of them white women, who I didn't even understand how to make them an ally. And I couldn't give them, I didn't even know how to relate to them because I had never been in that space before. I didn't know what to ask for. And another thing I'll just say, when you're building your allyships, you want to be real. As again, as a woman, I know what I want. However, your allies may not understand what you want. So you have to know how to ask for what you want.
Mm.
And for us, sometimes we think, well, of course, you should know what I want. You should know what I want as a Black woman. You should know what I want as a transgender person. Isn't it obvious? Well, my point is, it's not obvious. And when you're building relationships with allies, you have to be clear what you want from them. Now, there is a responsibility from the ally side where they need to educate themselves. They also need to reach across the table. They need to do those things. But the reality is, the people that we need as allies, most of the time, they don't understand what they should be doing.
Yeah.
And so, I teach a lot about emotional intelligence. And there's a level of emotional intelligence that comes with this allyship relationship.
And also, I think um, when you speak about
Mhm.
what do I want, how do they know what you want? Like you need to kind of make it kind of clear. Um, I also would caveat that as well is that for us as human beings, sometimes it's very difficult for us to be able to instantly look outside of ourselves and see things from another person's perspective. And
Exactly.
when I'm looking at someone who wants to have a relationship with me, unfortunately, I feel like, in all honesty, the first thing was what can you do for me? Like what do I want out of this? What am I going to get out of this? So I
Yes.
do feel like in order to build relationships and friendships and allies, you also need to have a good understanding as to what it is that they probably want, and what
Exactly.
and how you can then make that connection and align and see if there is alignment to what you want as well as what they want, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. What you're describing is a leadership tool that we talk about all the time, and that's emotional intelligence, like I just mentioned. A part of that is self-awareness. And so when we do DEI work as a leader, um, it's more than just putting people in roles and checking the box like we know. And okay, I need to hire two black. Anybody got two black people? Anybody have two Native Americans we could put in this slot? No, it's about leadership. It's about inclusive leadership, and one of the biggest tools we use in inclusive leadership is understanding emotional intelligence. And if you can incorporate emotional intelligence into your DEI work, you will have allies that are more self-aware. It's a part of the process, not the outcome. You understand that this is the work. I don't know. This is the work. The work is knowing thyself and then being able to be self-aware enough to boldly, courageously, confidently ask for what you need and expect that.
What advice would you give to upcoming DEI leaders to empower them and keep them motivated to continue on this challenging vital role?
Yeah, it's so funny because I actually thought about that, and it's really what I just said. In my book, I talk about the 7A, the 7D, and the 7R frameworks, and I won't get into all of those frameworks because each one has seven. And but the last chapter, and this I'm just saying from the bottom of my heart, in which I did not know when I was doing the DEI work. The number one thing I want your audience and people I talk to take away is taking care of yourself. So I have a section that talks about the 7 R's, and I'm just, I'm looking over here, I'm reading a little bit of it. It talks about rest, restoration, rejuvenation, relationships, remembrance. And that for me is remembering your ancestors, remembering who you are, remembering how you got there, celebrating, right? Recalibrating and being empowered to reinvent yourself. So I would go number one, rest. We have to get away from this white normative philosophy of work, 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 hustle, 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 hustle. And when you're in a DEI role, one thing that was common, and I've heard this from not just me, from Newman, you probably heard it too. You're not moving fast enough. So you're expected in the course of 2 or 3 months, sometimes 6 weeks, to turn an entire battleship around and have the entire organization DEI ready in a month or 6 months. Or sometimes these things can take 5, 10, 20 years, right? And so what happens is we instantly burn ourselves out. Okay, I'm going to have a meeting. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do. And what happens, what I would say, what I want to share, just to make it clear, is you have to take time for rest. When you take time for rest, you're able to be creative. You're able to have solutions. And it's important for your mental wellness. So that's my advice. Number one, if you hear nothing I've said today, take care of yourself. Ask yourself your why. Why am I in this role? Let me tell you, you're not getting brownie points most of the time. You're not- you- Unfortunately, and this is your HR, I'm putting my HR hat on. In my experience, you raising your hand to be the superhero that saves the company from all justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion DEI initiatives. And I love that DEI visual because it's, you're coming in, you're the Jedi. You're not getting brownie points for this Jedi role. You're not getting brownie points for being a superhero. If you are, measure that. How are you being rewarded for this role? And so that's what I would say to you. What has changed within your career since you've taken on this DEI volunteer role or new role? Is it giving you what you wanted for your career? And I would say 90% of the people I've talked to, it actually did the opposite. And I'm not saying don't have a career in DEI, excuse me. But what I did and what I learned quickly was I would take my career as a human resources person and do it with a DEI lens.
Yeah.
Everything I do has an equity lens.
And also, I think it's good to know and hear what to look out for, what to watch out for. So when you are asking that question of yourself, if you're not happy with the answer, then maybe it may well be the organization that you're at does not deserve you, and it's time to move on. That's
Love
what I take from that for sure.
it.
As well as you can definitely, and I think it's important because when we're talking about DEI work as well, it's not just on the shoulders of the chief diversity officer. It is everybody's responsibility to be able to create this and build an inclusive environment. So you should always be thinking about DEI in any field, I believe, that you're sitting in.
Exactly. Thank you. So well said. If you're the marketing person or salesperson, you don't have to be the head DEI person to integrate equity into your processes.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so that's the question. How are you doing that? And I just want people to be whole, right? The Diversity Dilemma, my book, is a journey on how do we get to being whole and just being a support for one another while we do this work.
Well, Dr. Thiele, I'm so glad that you joined us today on the podcast. I feel so honoured. Thank you so much for all of the advice and knowledge that you've shared with us today. For our listeners, I will be linking down below a link for you guys to check out Dr. Thiele's brand new book, The Diversity Dilemma. Make sure you grab a copy. It is absolutely amazing. Once again, Dr. Thiele, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you and thank you for all the work that you've been doing and you continue to do in the space.
Thank you for the space. This was a wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much.